Okay, let's get started, Dee. I'm here with Dee Yin from Be Strong Families, and we're having a conversation today with all of you. Hi, Maggie, on maintaining a positive relationship with your teen or emerging adult. And I'm Katthe Wolf. I'm your host. I'm the president and CEO of Be Strong Families. And I'm delighted to go through a little bit of housekeeping. Tracy, you want to do that, panelists and attendees, please? So Dee, let's go to the next slide so we can get the housekeeping out of the way. Ways to engage. The primary one is the chat, which is why I'm harping on you to get to the panelists and attendees, because that's how everybody's going to be able to talk to each other. And you can put whatever you want in the chat. Yes, thank you. You can do whatever you want in the chat as long as you follow the agreements, which we will learn about next. But the second way to engage is by actually talking. And for that to happen, you would need to raise your hand. Dee, who's in the background here, will unmute you, and then you'll need to unmute yourself. And we hope that we will have some brave souls who are willing to actually speak, because the conversation gets much more juicy that way. So let's go and remind ourselves of the agreements as we co-create this safe space together. So we ask that people speak from their own experience, basically be respectful, don't stay with us 100%. And if you need to disengage, disengage. So if you agree to uphold these agreements for the time that we're together, like half an hour, just type I agree in the chat. That's great. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle agrees. Anybody else? Tracy, Margaret, yay. Serena, Andrea, Taylor, yes. Awesome. So we are on a roll. Let's get started, Dee, with our first question. How do you foster and cultivate self-respect and pride in your teen or emerging adult? How do you foster and cultivate self-respect and pride in your teen or emerging adult? And I can fill some space until we get some comments in the chat or someone to raise their hand. I mean, I really think this starts a lot earlier than teenage years, but I think that, I think that in the teenage years and the emerging adult years, there can be some kind of challenges to positive self-esteem, self-respect, pride that we need to help our kids work through. Yes, praise them. Andrea says, Andrea, you want to make it go to panelists and attendees, please? And Amaris too. Praise for their effort and hard work. Yes. Katina says it will begin when younger and build. Yeah, that's where I was going too. Margaret says, when they have a problem, instead of telling them what to do, I ask what they think the solution is to their issue. Nice. And Tracy, first respecting that they are adults, or that they're, emerging adults, or that they're teenagers, that respecting them, showing them respect. I think Tracy's telling us also assist them with respecting themselves. And Tina says, yeah, value their opinions. Serena says, supporting them through their difficult times and listen as they work through being themselves. Exactly, Tracy said. Respecting them will help them respect themselves. I think it's also pointing out when their behavior doesn't seem to designate self-respect or pride. I'm thinking about this, like, just if you notice that, I mean, it's like warning signs, right? Like if something's going on, if you notice that grooming habits like radically shift, or that your teen or emerging adult just doesn't look like they're feeling good about themselves, like they just don't look like they're presenting themselves to the world in a way that is positive, that might be a cause for a conversation. Serena says, supporting them. Oh yeah. Black. Yes, Black says, I have community meetings, family meetings weekly to discuss issues or concerns, or just to talk, which makes it easier to talk about anything. And Black, you want to make your drop down menu, and Jennifer too, to panelists and attendees, because right now, I mean, I know people love to hear my beautiful voice and love me to get to emphasize things, but right now I'm the only person who can read it. So Jennifer says, my daughter is 11, but I felt this was still important and very much needed. I allow her to get involved and see what goes on in our community and how it not only affects them, but us also. She takes pride in helping, even in the smallest ways. That's another question, is what is your child proud of? What is your teen or emerging adult? When you think of self-respect or pride, what is your teen or emerging adult proud of? Like Jennifer says, her 11-year-old daughter takes pride in helping in the community in even the smallest ways. What do you feel that your teens or emerging adults are proud of? Makes them have self-respect. So I know this can be an issue, especially if they're not doing well. Like sometimes, I know with my son, when he was having issues, it really took a beating. His self-esteem, self-respect, pride took a beating. Like, I know many of us have been open about mental health challenges, and especially that he just felt like he wasn't succeeding in the ways that would allow him to be proud of himself. And no matter how many times I said, I think you're doing great, I think it didn't really penetrate because he wasn't living up to his own expectations. Serena says family and community, but when he helps our elderly neighbors to do things they can no longer do, receiving praise about the things he can do well. And Moto says proud of education and personal successes. Yeah, and that's what I was saying too, Moto. Like if somebody, or Moto Z, if somehow the personal successes aren't there, or the educational success is dropped off for some reason, it can be really difficult. I'm interested in what people do, or if anybody has an experience with that. And let's go to our next question while people are thinking. Feel free to raise your hand. Oh, this is a totally different topic, but it's really important, I think. What does healthy give and take look like in your relationship with your teen or emerging adult? And I think the assumptions built into this are that, when your child is very young, like there's not much give and take. Like it's mostly you're giving and they're taking, but reciprocity becomes something that is part of a relationship between a parent and an adult child, right? So how do you pave the way for reciprocity? How do you pave the way for reciprocity with your teen and emerging adult? Moto Z says, must communicate. Also, just encourage anybody who has a story. If this is triggering a story for anybody, feel free to raise your hand. Luan says, I learned to give words of encouragement or acknowledge their accomplishments. And Katina says, two-way, respectful, effective communication. Yeah, so that whole thing of giving respect and expecting respect in return. Nice. I think, compromise, Andrea says. Margaret says, talking about what is healthy-minded in general. Do not use examples from your own past when you're young. It sets a bar to meet or beat. And Black, you need to do it to all panelists and attendees, but Black says, be able to accept what they say. And Moto Z says, mutual respect. Oh, Lorianne says, positivity and mutual respect. And Katina says, when you don't belittle the emerging adult, they will be open to talking honestly. Sometimes Lori Ann says trust and safety. I'm feeling lonely here. I guess I'm feeling that sometimes, respecting, not belittling, but then there's stuff that people go through or youth go through, young adults, teens, that is difficult, that they don't necessarily, part of the developmental appropriateness for a teenager or emerging adult is trying to be independent, like to differentiate from parents, and so individuation. So sometimes I think, if they've gotten in over their head with drugs or drinking or with a relationship, with a romantic relationship, it's not always the thing that they're going to come to you first off. I guess maybe if you established a strong relationship, they could, but I don't know. If anybody else have teenagers who make their own decisions and then try to work their way out of them? I was like that as a kid. Margaret says, an atmosphere that does not always mean direct eye contact, such as bonfire. I had to improvise with a candle on the porch, but it helped. Yeah. We've got a question coming up. Let's go to the next question, Dee. So this is the next question that Margaret was kind of anticipating. When and where do you have important conversations with your teen or emerging adult? When and where do you have important conversations? That's like the Margaret was saying, like a bonfire, improvising with a candle on the porch, but it helped. I know for me, it was often car time. They could be in the back seat or the front seat, but not the direct eye contact, like where you're driving, your eyes on the road. When you're engaged in an activity with them. And Taylor says, Taylor and Katie, you kind of want to put the panelists and attendees in black too, because nobody can see what you're writing except me. So when you're engaged in an activity with them, Katie says, and Taylor says, definitely car time. And Black says every day, but I reflect on my teenage years and now I apologize to my parents. Yeah, I get that. It's hard to be a teenager or an emerging adult. It really is. Amara says, I would say the car or to the lake, or sometimes I go to her bedroom as often as I can. Sometimes dinner table was another one, and for me it was, you know what the other thing was? I had many important conversations with my teen and emerging adult by text. I know people say texting terrible, like blah, blah, blah. But to me, sometimes it was a way to be able to, like when I would text, not being able to see my face. And if I, the emotion, taking the emotion out of it a little bit, he was able to really be much more upfront in the text than even, oh, that's nice. Lorianne says, sitting back to back on the floor and talk about anything. That's connection and freedom from face to face. Nice. And Margaret says it helps to practice a Socratic method. Open questions, all responses welcomed. Yep. Yeah. And that's hard too. Anybody have difficulty with any of that? Like when you're really keeping a open when your teen or emerging adult says something that you find to be like totally against your values. Taylor, she can't see you. Lorianne can't see you because you haven't adjusted. You have to, in the drop-down menu, 2 panelists and attendees. It's the second one. But Lorianne, Taylor says, I like that. Sit back to back on the floor and talk about anything. I see what you're saying. Have you considered? Nice, Margaret. I see what you're saying. Lorianne said, yeah, that's great. I see what you're saying. Have you considered? It's so hard. It's so hard. All right, let's go to the next slide, Dee. We're powering through these conversations. Now we're going to go to the world of work. How do you model a healthy relationship with work and a positive work ethic? I think this is really, I mean, at least I have boys, but I found that it was really difficult for a while there in terms of like, they're not wanting to participate in like, I'm still having this with some of my emerging adult mentees, and is that the feeling is like working for someone else is slavery, and like they want to be their own boss and they want to have all the power and they want to, and so it's really hard. Even though I feel like I model a positive work ethic, my son would have said I was working all the time. but that has a downside too. And feeling like they just don't want to work that hard and they don't care that much about money, you know? I don't know, maybe it's not like they have money either. It's not like they're, doing really well. These are emerging adults, but just the relationship to work is really interesting. Anybody else have teens or emerging adults that have different relationship to work than you do? Yeah, be a role model. Z says, Laura Ann says, be a role model. I'm saying, I feel like I know a lot of people who are excellent role models of, healthy relationship with work and positive work ethic, but that there's, I don't know what it is, but that in the water now, in terms of peer relationships, that this positive work ethic relationship with work is being interpreted differently by teens and emerging adults. Anybody else experiencing that? Katie says, have an open and honest conversation with them. Let them ask any questions they want to ask without judgment. And Andrea says, talk about what you like about work and the challenges. Margaret says, I need your help with this because you're especially good at it. It will only take this amount of time. Oh, getting them to do chores. Some want to work with others. Some want to do a project on their own. Yep. All of this stuff is really, really great advice. Lorianne says, teens need to feel secure with themselves and not be bothered by peer pressure. Katina says, I try to be positive when discussing work, but I'm honest about my feelings. I try to give solutions to make it better. I guess I'm curious. I mean, are those of you, what are the challenges that you find with, using all of this great advice and great, like these positive, what are the challenges? Like Lorianne, when you say teens need to feel secure with themselves and not be bothered by peer pressure, do you have teens that are not bothered by peer pressure? Or care more about what their family thinks than what their friends think? Margaret says, oh, my daughter is 32 now. Laurie says, yeah. Margaret says, my son always asks how was work, and I try to have a positive example. And if there was an issue, how I resolved it, ended on a positive note. But when she was younger, she was a leader. Nice. Andrea says, a challenge, your teen not wanting your advice or feeling like they are not understood. Yeah. Tracy said, challenges for me is timing. When's the right time to start the conversation? And Serena says, the biggest challenge is not interrupting when they're being open with you. My 19-year-old looks for you listening. Tina says, this generation definitely not seeking to work 30 years on the same job. So we discuss their personal goals and how education and jobs can assist in meeting their personal goals. Margaret says, as a family, we've always been active in the community. It's a small community and we make it fun. They enjoyed the feedback from people and developed leadership skills. Nice. What do you what do you try to teach your teens or emerging adults about a healthy relationship with work and a positive work ethic? I mean, I guess for me, I am privileged to have a job that I love, but I've always navigated work doing things that I enjoyed, and so I guess I tried to pass that on, that work wasn't just a chore, didn't have to be just a chore to be able to make money, to be able to feed yourself and your family. It could also be like something that you enjoyed and used your talents in. And that was true when I was a teenager, with jobs. My first job was at Baskin Robbins scooping ice cream and decorating cakes. And I liked decorating cakes. I learned how to decorate cakes, I learned how to cook and had jobs in kitchens that I loved, but just to really think about a good fit also, like enjoying what you're doing and having it feel good and meaningful to you. Okay, so we discuss with our children. Okay, hold on. I want my teens to understand that school is their first job. Mm-hmm. Nice, Tracy. And Katina says, we discuss with our children, whatever you do, do it wholeheartedly, no matter the position, do your best. And Lorianne says, do your very best, take pride in your work, be altruistic. Margaret says, you can't please everybody, but you can listen and acknowledge their concern. 4-H was huge. Firefighter cadet program was huge. And Black says, do your best. And Katina says, yes, having a positive outlook on your job will make it better. And then also the connection between trainings, school training and jobs and opportunities that will be available to you, different opportunities depending on how you prepare yourself. I think that was another thing, like to think not like extremely one-to-one about it, but just that why would you want to get more education if you don't like school? Why would you want to do this certificate program? So let's go to the next question, Dee. Margaret says, I am by no means perfect, but I could acknowledge others' examples of good work ethic as well. Yeah. I think it's important for people to see a good work ethic being rewarded, and I feel like that happens. I did that also by, kind of pointing out stories of sports people like Michael Jordan. There's a lot. That's back in the day, went for the Bulls. He had an incredibly strong work ethic. I don't know if anybody saw the 5-part series that came out last year on him, but he was extremely talented, but he was also always like very competitive, but he was also like the hardest worker in the group, and he was respected because he was the hardest worker, and so the one that like really gave it all at practices and stuff. So I think that when there are stories about hard work paying off, and I think there's a lot of expectation among kids today that things should just go easy and that you should be able to move into a job at the highest level. Like you should be able to there's not a lot of understanding about paying dues, that I'm finding in the youth that I'm talking to, or that adults, I always like, when I started, I thought adults had, they had experience that was valuable. I respected that they'd been in this for a while. But there tends to be like this attitude that you just got, I don't know, somehow the people in charge are incompetent and got there by flukes or in other ways, which I think is really interesting. And I don't know why that seems to be the assumption. So our last question is, how do you assist your child in not being taken advantage of or mistreated in relationships, in the workplace, in society? How do you assist your child in not being taken advantage of or mistreated in relationships, in the workplace, in society? Tina says, I share experiences where I have been taken advantage of or mistreated. I share the outcomes, how I felt, and how I could have done things differently. Now I model how not to be taken advantage of. Also, I ask them how certain circumstances made them feel with siblings, friends, or other people. Black says, introduce your child to employment laws and their rights. Also go over their employee manual to make sure they understand, and do mock interviews if necessary. I love you guys. You're so smart. Margaret says, this question is the most difficult, especially in our forever family. We could talk until we're blue in the face, but our kids still had to experience it. But they were often open to conversation. We often say to them, did it feel right? What would you have done? This was a this one is also, it's really interesting. Again, I'm talking about my son a lot, but he came here from Ethiopia when he was 8 years old. And I remember one of the first experiences, like with kids playing, was with Pokemon cards back in the day, right? And he didn't really know which Pokemon cards were the best ones, and he had some really special ones. And the kids and downstairs neighbors, like, completely, he went down to play with them and traded with them, and they made really horrible trades. It's like took advantage of his not knowing, and really ripped him off. And I remember being really angry about that. And I talked to, but he always just wanted to just let things go. And that was kind of a pattern, like that he would be what I thought was taken advantage of, but he didn't want me to intercede with the adults. He wanted to work it out. And I think I really respect him, because he makes lines. Yes, now he's an adult, but not even an emerging adult. He's an adult, and he just looks at it like those people, it's their karma. And he doesn't say karma because he doesn't, but it's their karma. It's their problem that they act that way. It's not his. And so it's another attitude, I guess. Question, profound. Yeah, I mean, he's a deep person, but it's like, that's been, I mean, you either have to be willing, I don't know whether it's conflict averse, or you have to be willing to, like, go into it and advocate for yourself, and acknowledge how, and I did that when he was young sometimes, like if teacher, like when he was being taken advantage of and bullied or whatever, I would go in and talk to the teacher and get things. So I did, like, model and demonstrate how you do that. But a lot of times now that he's an adult, he just chooses not to. And Tracy says, I see young boys having that attitude to let things go, but not the young girls. Yeah. All right, well, we're at the end of our time for today. I'm really grateful that we have all these great questions, and you all really have all these great answers. And I feel like your friends and your children and everybody is blessed to have you in their company, because you really are extremely wise and also kind about just how you're treating your children, and teens and emerging adults. This theme is really a very, very profound one. So thank you, everybody. What's the next slide, Dee? Just want to let people know what's coming up. We're going to move towards living the protective factors this next week. And I'm going to be here tomorrow, and Sarita will be here for Wednesday and Thursday, and then Living the Protective Factors Cafe on Friday. All these questions, next slide, Dee. All these questions come from these questions on teens and emerging adults come from this Cafe Deck, which is our conversations about parenting teens and emerging adults. So if you like these conversations and you want to have more of them, this resource is available. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.